Hi, everybody. I just wanted to welcome you, and I'm excited that you get this opportunity. I'm home here in Cazenovia, New York. We've been here for about 8 weeks, just working with the horses at home, and we've been able to add our students in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I think it's been a strange time for a lot of us, but I think some creative minds have gotten together and made some maybe innovative things that we'll continue to do after this period is over too. And I think Ariat got creative here and offered this opportunity to us, and I hope you guys get a big benefit out of it. So I'll turn it back to Katie now.
So Beezie, our first question that we have is, how do you know when a horse and rider are ready to move up to a new division?
Yeah, I think that, that's one of those judgment calls that takes maybe yourself and your trainer to help advise you. But I think what we try to do is when a student or a horse gets consistent at one level, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're winning every class or placing even in every class, but they should be able to do consistent, solid rounds in it where you feel like everybody's got confidence to go up another level. And then what we try to do is introduce the higher level gradually. Stick to your normal level and stick a class or two in at a little higher level, then go back to your lower level. Same with a young horse. I think it's always good to make sure they're confident, and then when you start having consistent rounds at the higher level, then that can kind of be your level that you're at. But I think you need some results and some solid rounds in the level you're moving up from before you try to move up.
And then the next question I have for you that is kind of building off of that a little. What is the best advice you could give a beginner and starting out in their riding career?
A beginner, and all the way up through the levels, we really work on the basics. So your position, basics in all your riding, position, flat work, gymnastic work, then basics in horsemanship, whether it be taking care of the horse or trying to plan the horse's schedule, things like that. Try to get really good at that. And I think, if you're trying to go on and make this your profession, you have to develop some professional skills. And I think that's really important to, it's not just riding and horsemanship these days, it's people skills, it's comporting yourself well, especially on social media. I think the first thing we do when we get a resume is look at the person's social media and see what kind of person they are and try to see what personality they are. So remember that always reflects on you. And I think developing people skills, because whether you're training or trying to get owners, it's really important that you can communicate well. And that kind of leads into education as well. You definitely need some education to be able to communicate well, come up with ideas for maybe some innovative ideas for putting a syndicate together to buy horses, or starting a business. You need some education for that.
And the next question I have here is, somebody asked that they said they have kind of a bad habit of allowing their reins to get long. Any suggestions as far as keeping short reins?
First thing I would say is shorten your reins, but I think, if it was that easy, obviously you would be doing it. I think if I was at home, or if I had a student at home that did that, I would tell them pick certain places in the ring, maybe just one place. Each time you go around there, you check your rein length. I think you can do the same when you're jumping or in a court or in a class. Just pick a place. It's obviously the ends of the rein is going to be the most logical place to tell yourself to adjust your reins. And I think like anything you're learning, it's going to feel exaggerated at first, and it's going to feel a little uncomfortable until it becomes a habit, and then you'll be comfortable with it. So just know that if you feel like your reins are short enough, make them a little shorter.
All right, and then the next one, I know you will have some really good advice. They say, I have a 22-year-old horse who is doing really well, still jumping, but they want to know how to know when to retire their horse. Is it just age, or do you need to pay attention to how they're doing and acting?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think it's really a judgment call, and it has to do a lot with feeling, but I think there's also a few things you can look for. it kind of depends too what your expectations are of what level you want them to do. So obviously a lot of my horses are jumping at a very high level, and when they're not doing it as well as they used to, or it seems to be a little difficult for them, or maybe it takes a lot more time and resources to prepare them and have them go their best at a high level, I think it's time to really retire them. And there's other, it depends on the person, the owner, and the rider's outlook too. I mean, some of those horses could probably go on and have a career, another short career at a lower level with some not more novice riders. But it really comes down to what you think is best for the horse. And I think you have to. I think it comes to, some people might have the opinion that horses really love serving people and working with people, and that they might be happier with another rider or going to maybe just trail riding with somebody than they would be living out in the field. So it really becomes a personal thing. But I think any decision you make has to be based on, no matter what horse you have and how much they've done for you, you have to treat horses with respect, and your decisions should always be based on that.
All right. So next question is kind of back on the riding side. Somebody asks, I tend to get too far forward in my seat before the jump. Any suggestions on how to overcome that, or anything that may be helpful?
Yeah, if I have a student that we call it kind of jumping ahead of the horse, basically I really tell them to wait for the horse to jump up to them. The other thing is sometimes if you think of touching your seat to the saddle right before the takeoff, that'll help as well, because you obviously can't jump ahead of the horse too much if your seat is in the saddle. And again, along with the shortening the reins, anything you're trying to change is going to feel really exaggerated at first. So I tell my students sometimes to try to get left at the fence, feel like they're getting left behind, and then they do it about right, usually then. So I think you just have to remember that anytime you're correcting a habit, it's going to feel awkward until you make the correct part of it a habit.
What warm-ups do you do to get you and your horses in the right mindset before a big class or something like that?
Okay, I think they're talking about at the horse show, but really most of the preparation is done before you get to the show, or it should be done before you get to the show. So my warm-up at the show is basically the important part, I would say, is having a plan of when you're going to get on, which should be in plenty of time to get ready, because I think the times you get in the most trouble is when you're in a rush and you're having to do things faster than you want, or maybe you haven't had a chance to go over the course enough or something like that. So the really important part of that is time management, and make sure you get on in time to warm up. If you have an older horse, that might be a little more time. If you have a horse that's pretty sensitive, that might be a little more time as well. Maybe you have a horse that gets wound up the more you're on it, then I would get on a little later. Get on so he doesn't have time to get too wound up. So it really is an individual thing based on what the horse needs.
And then kind of building on top of that, how do you deal with any nerves that you have when you're at a show?
I'd say a lot the same answer. Make sure you have done your preparation at home as well as you can, and that you're doing a class that you feel that you're perfectly capable of. I like to have my equipment all prepared. I don't want to end up having to run back to the barn and get a different pair of spurs or a stick because I forgot my stick, something like that. So or maybe you meant to have a different bridle on the horse or a different bit on the horse and it comes up with the wrong, just make sure everything is organized beforehand, and that you, again, have plenty of time to warm up and get on time so you don't feel rushed. That's my biggest thing that I try to do.
What exercises do you do at home and at the show with any anxious horses you might have? It sounds like you may have kind of already answered that question a little bit with kind of these pre-show rituals that you might do. But if you could elaborate, it sounds like this person might have an anxious horse that they're looking for some advice with.
There's always gymnastics you can work on if they want to rush through things that you can slow them down with. I'd say a lot of transitions, maybe you stop and pull them up before a fence, maybe you jump a line and stop and pull them up on the end of the rein. Anything you can do to slow their brains down a little is helpful. I think the most important thing is that the rider is not in a rush. When you go from, say you do a transition, you jump a line and you stop the horse, or you walk or you trot, don't take one walk step and ask him to canter again. Let him take a breath at the walk or the trot or whatever you're doing, and then go back to the canter. And I think, just even when you're setting off to do your pattern or your course, don't just boot them into the canter. Take a little time that they take a little breath between, and that you take a little breath. And I think if all else fails, and nothing seems to be working, I would check with, if there's any veterinary reason that the horse is so anxious that you can't make him a little better. They might have some pain somewhere that you can't tell. They might have a stomach issue. So I've had some horses that makes them quite anxious and quite excited sometimes, or maybe even a breathing issue, which you should be able to hear. But all those things are worth checking if you're really struggling with it.
Now we're going to switch over to some questions that are coming in on the Zoom chat. The first one is from Caroline. She was wondering the best way to help develop your hands and seat.
Just really a lot of flat work and practice. Obviously some work without stirrups is good. Having somebody help you with all of that is important as well. Somebody on the ground telling you to fix something because it's something that you've gotten comfortable with, you don't even know that you're doing wrong. I think some work in the 2-point, basic dressage work that you have to coordinate your leg and your hand aids together is a good thing. I think the most common mistake, or not really mistake, but everybody at a beginner level is going to have a bit stiff arms. So you have to try to really work on relaxing your arms and your elbows and not working with too low a hand. I see that as the most common thing I see in riders these days. It's kind of a fashion, but they ride with their hands too low. And what that does is puts the bit right in the corners of the horse, or on the bars of the horse's mouth. You want to have a straight line from the bit to your elbow, so that you're not pulling down on the horse's mouth, because that's uncomfortable for them.
Angie asked, how many days do you recommend doing flat work versus jumping? Or if there's a specific formula to that, or does it just depend on the horse?
Basically depends on the horse and what your schedule is. If you have a horse that's maybe had some time off and hasn't jumped in a while, I would jump it maybe a couple times the first week, a couple times the next week, then maybe a week off, and do it a couple times the next week. But just to get it up to a level of fitness. And then once our horses are showing and competing, they obviously jump at the shows, and then in between we would do really as little as possible that we feel like to get them ready for the next show. We tend to show not so often 2 weeks in a row, so our horses will jump and then get a week off at least, and then they'll jump probably once before they show again. If they've had 2 weeks off, maybe twice. But we try to keep it to a minimum level and still have, try to always working on try to make their strengths a little stronger and their weaknesses go away a little bit.
And then another question we have here is from Rose, and she says, what do you do if you feel that your horse doesn't feel right in the moment? Do you push forward or do you back off?
Yeah, that's a horsemanship question, really. It goes with a little bit of feeling you have for horses. I think if there's something that you can pinpoint that's bothering them at the time, I would address that, obviously. If it's a bit of a mystery what's bothering them, I would probably try to push through it for a little while. And if it's not getting better, then again, try to go to some kind of veterinary advice with that, or advice from your trainer. And sometimes, if all else fails, we'll just give the horse a week or two in the field and start up again later, because Mother Nature can do a lot sometimes.
And then I have another question from Angie here. She's asking if you have any recommendations on how to prevent your toes from drifting outward. If you have any like workouts that you may do to strengthen, or just any little tips.
I think if your toes are going out, you're probably want to try putting a little more weight in the outside of your stirrup, or in your little toe, and that'll bring your toes in a little bit. I don't know that it's really a strength thing, or probably just a habit they've developed. So in order to fix that, I would probably put more weight in my little toe, and that'll bring your toes in a little bit.
Okay, perfect. And then we have a couple follow-up questions here to some of the answers that you gave. When jumping in a line, she says her horse will sometimes rush to the second jump and she has a hard time slowing her down. Do you have any advice on that?
I would probably jump into the line and pull the horse up a few times, or maybe even circle the horse in front of the second jump and then jump the second jump. But I think it's kind of their nature to run a little. So I think the best thing you can do is really spend a lot of time jumping them into a line, stopping them. You can do that a lot with rails on the ground too, if you're not jumping at the time, so that you get more times where you could work on that with your horse without jumping them too. Then you can jump into a line and make the second jump very low. You can trot the second jump in the line. Anything you can be creative with to makes the horse slow down for the second jump rather than speed up is going to be good for them.
I have a couple more like specific questions that people have. So Margie said that she has a horse that's having trouble picking up the left lead under saddle as well as on the lunge line. Is there any specific techniques to help with maybe a weak lead?
Yeah, I'm guessing that it's a young horse that's probably just learning to be ridden under saddle. And I think a lot of people try to ride a young horse like they would an older horse and bend them to the inside and pick up the lead, where that's not very natural for a horse. That's something that we need to teach them. So I would make sure you use a little more outside rein as you go to pick it up, and also do it on a turn rather than a straightaway. Other than that, I think it's just, maybe the horse just needs to get stronger on that lead as well. So I would do it a little, continue on the lunge line sometimes, and also riding them, and again, try to pick it up on the turn so that they naturally find better balance on the left lead.
Lori asked, she says she gets unorganized on the other side of the jump. How does she kind of hold herself together?
A lot of times that's a balance issue, with probably losing your balance a little on the landing of the fence, and that's just a matter of getting a little tighter in the saddle, maybe a little work without stirrups, just general more time in the saddle, and always try to land with your weight in your heels or in your weight in your stirrups, so that you're not sometimes if your leg slides back and your heels aren't down, you fall forward on the horse even more. So I always try to tell the students to really try to land with their weight in their heels, and that tends to help their balance and their recovery time on the landing.
The last question I have that's more specific is from Reese, and she says that what is the easiest way to drop and pick up your stirrups? Having trouble getting your stirrups back when you're not just at the walk.
When you're trying to get them back at the trot or the canter, the stirrups are moving, and I think that's the big issue. So obviously you want to try to turn your toes in to get the stirrups, but also as you're trotting and as you're cantering, try to keep the stirrup between your foot and the horse, and then it won't twist around or slide around as much. And then it'll be easier just to turn your toe in and get your stirrup, and practice. It takes a lot, just more times trying to do it. Just drop your stirrups, pick them back up, drop your stirrups, pick them back up. And the only other thing I can say is I don't like a lot of these really lightweight stirrups because they are difficult to get back once you lose them. I think the stirrup needs a little weight to it so that it's not bouncing around when you're trying to get it back.
Okay, great. Okay, I've the last two questions. The first question I have is from Riley, and she wants to know what kind of exercises you do for your legs, maybe in the gym, or any specific exercises that you do to prepare yourself outside of just riding.
I try to work out in the gym 3 days a week, and I have a trainer that helps me. We've been doing FaceTime. That's another new thing I've been trying now that we can't go to the gym. But yeah, I do. I mean, I do what he tells me, but there's a lot of lunges and squats and stuff like that, jump rope. I don't know, a lot. And just anything to strengthen my legs like that, we do. And I do some stretching in the morning, basically with my hamstrings and stuff like that. I think some people tend to get tight calves, especially if you do another sport with a lot of running or something. So one thing you can do is stand on the stairs or anything that's raised up and try to stretch your heels down and stretch your calves. And that'll help with your riding.
And the last question we have is, what advice would you have for somebody who wants to become a working student?
Working student is, I think a lot of things what I said as my advice to beginners, try to present yourself well all the time. Social media is important to have in a professional way. And I think, yeah, just trying to learn all things about horsemanship, because it's hard to be a working student if you don't know anything going in. You know, you have to have some value to somebody that they want to take you on. So if it's not your riding ability, it's got to be some other ability that impresses somebody that wants to take a chance on you. So find a way to impress people with that. And I think, I mean, for us, it's more interesting if they don't have a horse. So I think don't get discouraged if you don't have a horse, because some people that want to come as a working student with a horse end up being more baggage than they're worth, because you have to take care of the horse for them. So we don't usually offer to do that for free for people, especially in the beginning. So I think if you're without a horse, you almost have an advantage. Thank you guys, and I ditto what Katie said. I hope you guys got a lot out of it, and it's been fun.